Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this Russell Museum event. You're going to be hearing, I believe, a grand total of 9 poems today, and for me, poetry is a wonderful way to nurture the soul and connect with the human experience in very powerful ways. And I think in this time of COVID and the physical isolation that we're all experiencing, I think hearing a series of poems I hope for you will be very rewarding and help nourish your soul at a time when we could all use such nourishment. I want to thank Sarah Alger, the director of the Russell Museum, for helping pull this program together, as well as Dr. Joe Betancourt, who's our vice president for equity and inclusion, and Suzanne Koven, our writer in residence and primary care physician. So I look forward to hearing 8 of the poems, and then I have the honor of adding cleanup and reading the 9. So at this point, I'm going to turn the Zoom program over to Dr. Suzanne Koven.
Well, thank you, Dr. Slavin, and hello, everyone. When this is the second Poetry at Work event at Mass General in celebration of National Poetry Month. Last year, at the Russell Museum, we had a standing room only crowd, elbow to elbow. And it became pretty clear a few weeks ago that that wasn't going to happen this year. Now, a hospital could perhaps be forgiven for letting a celebration of National Poetry Month slide during a pandemic, not this hospital. And I think it's just a testimony to our community and our leadership that a chance to gather together, even virtually, and share art and beauty, and just to rejoice in the human voice in all of its great diversity. Before COVID-19 hit, we had planned to make things a little different this year. I teamed up with my dear colleague, Dr. Joe Betancourt, to offer a little twist on the program. And I'd like to welcome Joe now to tell us a little bit about that.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. And thanks to all of you who are with us here today, and certainly I want to thank our group of poets. Suzanne and I have developed a great relationship over the last bunch of months, getting to know each other and really, I think, understanding the importance of art, literature, culture, poetry, music, and all these ways to bring us as a community together, and certainly across multiple lines, but also as a way to enter into some hard conversations and be able to also see each other in different ways that we might not have seen each other in the past. And I think this event was one of the first things that we thought a collaboration would be perfect for. And together, we've come up with a marriage of the minds and of ideas that allow us to do a couple of things. Number one, bring art to people and in a time where reflection is incredibly important. But number two, bring it from a cross-cultural perspective and hear from different cultures, hear poems in different languages. And I'll end by saying that this is particularly timely given how this pandemic is a global pandemic and is impacting people of all backgrounds and all cultures, and everybody represented on who's on among our poets, but also who's listening here. And I could speak personally for our hospital in that we know that this pandemic has had a disproportionate burden on minority populations, particularly Latino patients. But I would say that the most beautiful thing I experience every day as a caregiver is how we as a community, and unfortunately it takes crises like these, have come together in such incredible and magnificent ways across disciplines, across cultures, putting people first. And so it's with that spirit of joy that we come together here today to look at a brighter future, to talk and share our perspectives, and really to get a chance to hear, I think, many beautiful words that hopefully will inspire you, allow you to reflect, and allow Suzanne and I to kick off what we know will be a fruitful relationship going forward. And so very thankful for all of you, for Peter as always for his continued support, and for the museum for helping us facilitate this, and certainly all our poets, and most importantly you for being here with us today. So enjoy. We're going to give this our best, and we know it means a lot to us. We hope it means a lot to you. Suzanne?
Thank you, Joe. We're going to begin, I think, very appropriately with the chief nurse of Massachusetts General Hospital, Deborah Burke. Debbie participated in last year's poetry event. It was actually the highlight, I think, of the entire event. She read her prize-winning haiku from elementary school, and it was really fantastic. Next week kicks off National Nurses Week, and nurses, of course, have been on the front lines as heroes in this pandemic, and of course every day. So Debbie, welcome.
Thank you. So this poem, appropriately, is entitled Nurse by Dorian Locks. And you should know that when Suzanne asked me to read this, my initial impression was, oh, I don't know. And I've grown to really love it. And I hope you do too. My mother went to work each day in a starched white dress. Shoes clamped to her feet like pale mushrooms. 2 blue hearts pressed into the sponge rubber soles. When she came back home, her nylon streaked with runs, a spatter of blood across her bodice. She sat at one end of the dinner table and let us kids serve the spaghetti, sprinkle the Parmesan, cut the buttered loaf. We poured black wine into the bell of her glass. As she unfastened her burgundy hair, shook her head, and began. And over the years, we mastered it, how to listen to stories of blocked intestines while we twirled the pasta, of saws teething cranium, drills boring holes in bone as we crushed the crust of our sourdough, carved the stems off our cauliflower. We learned the importance of balance, how an operation depends on cooperation and a blend of skills, the art of passing the salt before it's asked for. She taught us well, so that when Mary Ellen ran the iron over her arm, no one wasted a moment. My brother headed straight for the ice. Our little sister uncapped the salve, and I dialed the number under ambulance, my stomach turning to the smell of singed skin, already planning the evening meal, the raw fish thawing in its wrapper, a perfect wedge of flesh. So I'd like to just share a couple of my thoughts about this. First, I really could relate to a lot of the images in this poem, particularly many of you who are nurses out there might remember they were called nursemaid shoes, that were the white shoes with the blue heart. I also laughed at the idea of storytelling, stories that probably seemed inappropriate at the dinner table and yet became normal for most of us. And the stories become something that family members enjoy and actually ask for. And sometimes the goriest stories are enjoyed the most and asked to be repeated a number of times. I can also see the fatigue and perhaps battle scars, the nylons ripped, the blood on the uniform, similar to what many nurses are feeling right now during this pandemic. And the blurring of the lines between work and home life, because nursing is not just a job, it's who we are. I hope that you enjoyed this poem as I have grown to as well. Thank you. I'd like to turn it back to Joe Betancourt, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. And I'll just, in the spirit of transparency, I just sent Debbie a message yesterday that meant so much to me, and that this poem means even more to me than it ever has after my experiences in the last few weeks working with nurses. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Next, we are going to turn to Aswita Tan McGrory, who's Executive Director of the Mongan Institute and Director of the Disparity Solution Center. Aswita is somebody who I've known for 15 years, as we've had a chance to work very, very closely. And she is going to share her poem. This is where we will go into bilingual mode. And so, Aswita, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I was born in the Netherlands, born and raised in The Hague and Amsterdam, and I moved to the United States when I was 13. And I was raised as an only child by a single mother, and so reading was very much an outlet for me. And I chose a poem by one of my favorite children's authors. This is the book from when I came over. I apparently brought it with me. Her name is Annie Schmidt. And she is actually very famous in Holland, and her poems go back as far as 1950. The one I chose was written in 1978. And I picked the poem because it's about otters, which my 8-year-old daughter is currently obsessed with. She's been obsessed with otters since she was 2. And the other thing that I thought was really fantastic when I read the poem was that there is a message about being inclusive and what it means in the otter world if there is such a thing as structural racism. So I'll read you the poem in Dutch first, and then I will read you the English translation. 3 oude ottertjes bij Annie Schmidt. 3 oude ottertjes wilden gaan varen over de Zimzon, over de Zaan. Eigenlijk wilden ze dat al sinds jaren, maar om het feit dat ze ottertjes waren, hadden ze het nog nooit gedaan. Want daar hing een bord op alle bottertjes, verboden voor ottertjes. 3 oude ottertjes stonden te schreien, daar bij de Zimzon, daar bij de Zaan. Stonden te schreien op het land en ze zeiden, dan gaan we maar naar het spoortreintje rijden, dat zal wel beter gaan. Maar daar hing een bordje op elk coupé, ottertjes mogen niet mee. En 3 oude ottertjes stonden te turen, over de Zimzon, over de Zaan, daar op dat weilandje tussen 2 schuren, daar was een vent waar je fietsen kon huren. Fietsen met vaantjes eraan, en daar hing een bordje op iedere fiets. Ottertjes mogen voor niets. Nu rijden die ottertjes over de brug en weer terug. And here's the English version in case you didn't understand that. 3 elderly otters. 3 elderly otters longed to go boating, out on the river, out on the boat. For years they had wished they could be out there floating, but being otters, they couldn't help noting signs on the seats of every last boat, written by renters, the miserable rotters. They said, forbidden for otters. 3 elderly otters standing there crying, there by the river and there by the moat, crying and weeping and finally sighing. Maybe the train is fun and worth trying, but stuck in each window they spied a small note that had them howling with their heads bowed. It said, otters not allowed. 3 elderly otters, tired and spent, leaving the river and moat far behind, saw a meadow next to a tent, a big row of bicycles ready to rent, and hung from each handlebar was a small sign that made their day. And what did it say? It said, otters don't need to pay. Now the otters ride over the dike, and back to their bikes. I'll turn it back over to the facilitators.
Thank you so much, Aswita. Next, we're going to hear from Josue Espinoza, who is the manager of the endocrine division in the Department of Medicine, also works in our transgender program. And he also will be reading for us in both English and another language, in this case, Spanish.
Thank you, Suzanne. So the poem that I'm reading is actually an excerpt from a song called Oleada by Julieta Venegas. And I chose this, I first heard this song probably about 17 years ago. when my oldest sister, went off to college. And at the time, I didn't know what it meant to have a family member leave. She went to the University of California at Santa Barbara. And when I first visited there, it was the first time that I really realized what it meant to not necessarily lose somebody, but lose somebody in a sense. And the song has really stuck with me, particularly throughout life, as many of us at the hospital have experienced, traveling from place to place, whether it's work or whatever that takes us where we are. We always seem to keep some part of where we go with us. And I think it's particularly true during these times that we're living in now, where we're going to keep something that we've learned or experienced with us for the rest of our lives. So here it is. I'll read it in Spanish first. No quisiera detener esta olada que me lleva. ¿A dónde? ¿A dónde? No lo sé. Solo me muevo con ella. Y nadie ahí me conocerá, y a nadie ahí reconoceré, pero no tengo miedo. No quisiera detener esta olada que me lleva. Y todo lo que ya viví, lo sigo cargando. Lo llevo muy dentro de mí. Nunca lo he olvidado. Lo siento tan cerca de aquí. Lo llevo muy dentro de mí. And in English, I don't want to stop this wave that carries me. Where, I don't know. I just move with it. And no one will know me there. And I'll recognize no one there. But I'm not afraid. I don't want to stop this wave that carries me. And everything that I've lived, I still carry with me. I carry it deep within. I've never forgotten it. I feel it so close to here. I carry it deep within me. Thank you.
Thank you, Josue. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. We're next going to turn to our poet and a friend of mine who I've gotten to know even better over the last couple of months, but who I had seen around because he's very visible, very present, and I think a leader in many of the activities that I've been had the privilege to participate in, and that's Jeremiah Kinuya. Jeremiah is program coordinator and benefits manager in infectious disease, and he will tell us about his poem. And again, we will hear this from the viewpoint of two languages and two cultures. So, Jeremiah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. I picked up a poem on love. And needless to say, the past 4 years have been pretty interesting as far as love is concerned. We are a nation of great invitation and loving a nation. And I think, forgive me if I differ with anybody, as love has been challenged. I'm Kenyan by descent, and it is unique. It is a unique thing to just see how things have changed. I think about this epidemic, it takes me back to my time in Kenya in the 80s when there was rationing of sugar and flour. And the rationing had no respect of persons. Regardless of your income bracket, you had to line up and get flour and sugar. And the same thing this epidemic has done to all of us. It has made us get together and show more love to one another. One word that will be translated in English is why has my lover tormented me? And you would think about why has our nation turned around and ignored love. Here we go. It will be in Kiswahili. Ewe bibi mwenye enzi, salamu zangu pokea. Mbona umenipa kazi, pendo sijazoea. Rohi na majuzi, moyo yame nieza. Fikira na tambano, pendo lipi hii ni ukweli. Ulisema wewe ni wangu, mpaka mwisho wa dunia. Ukapa mjina la Mungu, hadi nia. Sasa kama ni mwenzangu, mbona unanikimbia? Fikira ina tambano, mbona pendo lipi kweli. Siku ile tulionana, leo naikumbuka. Jinsi tuliopendana, kwanza ilikuzitikia. Leo tunatambana, kufikia nusu njia. fikiri utambano, pendo lipi ni ya kweli. Niko mbele ya Kamau, hakuna kuzingia, moyo inaulaumu, pendo lako irudie, mpenzi tafadhali, nime kuzindikia, fikiria utabani, pendo lipi ni la kweli. In English, "Oh heavenly lady, please accept my greetings. Why do you torment me? I am new to this feeling. My soul is full of pain, my heart sent slumping. Think it through and you will see this love is true. You said you would be mine until the world ended. You promised in God's name I was what you wanted. Now it is like you're not mine. I was not, why am I avoided? Think it through and you will see this love is true love. The moment our eyes met, I recall it today, how we loved each other or how we did anyway. Why discard me? You didn't come halfway. Think it through, you'll see this love is true love." A crowd has assembled, shyness envelops me, but my heart accuses, insist our love must be. What is it that you meant, darling? I still can't see. I think it through and you will see this love is true. And MGH has surely shown what love is to the community. Thank you, Dr. Slavin. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremiah. So beautiful. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Louise Ivers, who is the Executive Director of the MGH Center for Global Health. Louise.
Thank you. I'm going to read a poem by Seamus Heaney, which he wrote about his boyhood and a moment with his mother. It's called "When All the Others Were Away at Mass." When all the others were away at Mass, I was all hers, and we peeled potatoes. They broke the silence, let fall one by one, like solder weeping off the soldering iron. Cold comforts set between us, things to share, gleaming in a bucket of clean water, and again let fall. Little pleasant splashes from each other's work would bring us to our senses. So while the parish priest at her bedside went hammer and tongs at the prayers for the dying, and some were responding and some crying, I remembered her head bent towards my head, her breath in mine, our fluent dipping knives, never closer, the whole rest of our lives. I chose that poem because for me it really evokes the beauty of a very ordinary moment, a moment of solitude and togetherness of a boy and his mom. And it reminds me of growing up in Dublin. I moved to America when I was 24 years old to work at Mass General, actually as a resident. And one of the most comfortable memories of my childhood was being in the kitchen with my grandmother. We ate a lot of potatoes, but my memory is more of her making bread. But I thought that these days, if we're not trying to take care of patients or, working in the communities in the pandemic, we have a lot of solitude or at home with our family units. And so the poem just reminds me that there's a lot of beauty and love in small moments. And often those most simple moments really are the ones that are most enduring. So thanks for inviting me to join.
Thank you, Louise. We hear again and again the theme of love echoing, and perhaps to many listening that seems unexpected, particularly at this moment and at a hospital, but it's entirely fitting. There's a lot of love here, particularly now. And now we're going to hear another love poem. This one read by Marge Lee, who works at Mass General as an international marketing manager.
Hi, thank you everyone. Thank you the organizer for giving me this opportunity to share my favorite poetry with all of you. Like what Suzanne said, this is all about love again. This poem is from the Tang Dynasty, which is about 1,300 years ago. So I'm going to read it in Mandarin first and then say it in English. 望月怀远，作者张九龄。海上生明月，天涯共此时。情人怨遥夜，竟夕起相思。灭烛怜光满，披衣觉露滋。不堪盈手正，还情梦佳期。So in English, this poem's name is Moonlit Love Sicknesses by Zhang Jiuling. The bright moon is rising from the sea. Even though we are far away from each other, we all share these beautiful moments together. Lovers are parted in this lonely night. The night seems so long and sad. I can think of no one but you. The moon is so bright and beautiful. I put out the candle, go outside and enjoy this moment. My clothes is wet with the evening moist. I try to send you my moon in my own hand, but it is impossible. So I will go to bed now, and at least in my dream, I can be united with the people that I love. So the reason I picked this poem was written when the poet Zhang Jiuling was sent far away from his family. The beauty of this poem is expression of how people are missing each other and imagine how they can still connect it to everyone while the physically impossible. So I found this poem especially touching for me at this moment because of the crisis of COVID-19. Many people has to be separated from each others, such as the doctors and the nurse who will help the community to fight the crisis, but they also afraid to get infected and get the germ to their home. So many of them choose to live in a hotel or maybe just get isolated, not so close to their kids until the crisis is in control. Also, a lot of family people are postponing their trip to visit each other's. People are staying home in order to flatten the curve. But the poem itself is not about sad or joy. It's simply an expression of love. Even though life sometimes is cruel to us sometimes, but we still have the love and we still have this beautiful nature and the sky and everything around us to share. So thank you very much, and especially for the people who are fighting in this battle, and go strong. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you, and thank you for those special words. I now want to introduce another friend, somebody who I've gotten to know over the years in a professional and to some degree in a personal capacity, Paulo Chavez. Paulo is a senior medical interpreter at MGH for Portuguese and has worked with me with many of my patients. And he's been a champion in the Collaborative Governance, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee since 2018. He also leads the yearly trainings of Harvard medical students at MGH on how to communicate more effectively with patients with limited English proficiency and those who are deaf. So Paulo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. The poem I'm going to be reading for you guys is from Clarice Lispector. She is a Brazilian author who was much recognized because of her innovative writing and peculiar personality that was considered ahead of her time. She really had an artistic view that was considered much ahead of her time. She, her main goal, I would say, was to reach the deepest areas of the reader's mind. And she does it or did it so beautifully in her work through bluntness and boldness and sometimes irreverence, and also by being highly personal in her style of writing. Some of my favorite quotes from her are this one: "My freedom comes through in my writing. My words are my dominion over the world." And also this one: "One who is able to endure intense suffering is also able to feel intense joy." A lot of her work was actually done in crisis and in times of despair. Because of a serious accident, she spent the last decades of her life in continuous pain, but still she was steadily writing and publishing novels and stories until her early death in the 1970s. So the short excerpt that I chose from her work, I like how she talks so boisterously about the connection. See, working as a medical interpreter in a large institution such as Mass General is truly a unique experience because of the nature of our work. And we get to witness firsthand as a third party this patient-provider connection that happens every single day. And aside from the vast amount of knowledge that we acquire every day from directly participating in all types of encounters from all levels of medicine, the thing that stands out to me the most in my 15 years of experience is actually the difference that a well-established connection can make in the care and the life of the patients that we help each day. And I'm humbled and honored to be a conduit that facilitates that connection. And also I chose this excerpt from her work before we took a hit from this crisis. And ironically, given the circumstances that we all find ourselves in at this very moment, it's been challenged to connect with our patients in that way that we're so used to. But it's not just with the patients. All of us are being affected by this lack of physical connection to a certain degree. The physical distancing that we're all being forced to endure will probably leave an emotional scar in so many of us and in the patients that we work with. So as we weather this pandemic and cope with loneliness and loss and confusion and uncertainty, I treasured these moments of interaction and this sense of connection now more than ever. So this little excerpt that I chose talks a little bit about connection in that bold way that Clarice Lispector knows how to write. So I'll first read this in Portuguese and then I'll do the translated version into English for you guys. So here we go. Sou composto por urgências. Minhas alegrias são intensas, minhas tristezas absolutas. Entupo-me de ausências, esvazio-me de excessos. Eu não caibo no estreito, eu só vivo nos extremos. Pouco não me serve, médio não me satisfaz. Metades nunca foram meu forte. Todos os grandes momentos, feitos com amor e carinho, são para mim recordações eternas. Palavras até me conquistam temporariamente, mas atitudes me perdem ou me ganham para sempre. Suponho que me entender não é uma questão de inteligência, e sim de sentir, de entrar em contato, ou toca ou não toca. I'm composed of urgencies. My joys are intense, my sorrows absolute. I fill myself from the absence, I empty myself from the excess. I don't fit in the straight, I only live at the extremes. Little does not serve me, average does not satisfy me. Halves were not my forte. All the big and small moments, made with love and care, they are eternal memories for me. Words may even temporarily win me over, but attitudes lose me or win me forever. I suppose that understanding me is not a matter of intelligence, but instead it's about feeling. It's about the contact. You either touch or you don't at all. Thank you. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Paulo. And last, we're going to hear from Dr. Peter Slavin, president of Mass General. Being in a leadership position such as this at a time like this, I think must be very hard. But making sure that there are adequate PPEs and deployment of thousands of personnel into new roles and creation of new clinics and so forth may even be the least of it. I think the most of it, the hardest part of it, is creating a culture where what we're doing here right now is not only possible, but necessary and celebrated. And I just think it's really unique. And I know that I speak for everyone here on this screen and everyone listening that we thank you for that. So as is fitting, boss, you get the last word.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, for that very kind introduction. The truth of the matter is we have a great team here at the hospital and an amazing group of 26,000 people that make up this community. I'm going to read a poem written by Marge Piercy, who grew up in Detroit. She's a prominent American poet as well as an activist. And the poem I'm about to read from her, entitled "To Be of Use," is the poem that she described as her favorite. And I read this poem as a tribute to those 26,000 people that make the MGH community so special. I've had the privilege of being part of it for 35 years, and I've always been amazed by the dedication, the hard work, the ingenuity, the compassion of the people who make up this great institution. But I have to say, in the last 2 months, I've never been more proud to be associated with this place, because what people have accomplished as we battle against this horrible virus has truly been inspirational. So I want to pay tribute through this poem to the hundreds of clinicians, doctors, nurses, and others who have worked their magic over the last 8 weeks, and in some cases have been redeployed to other parts of the hospital outside of their comfort zones. We have outpatient nurses working on some of our inpatient units, and we have subspecialists working in our respiratory illness screening clinics. I want to thank the respiratory therapists, medical assistants, interpreters, secretaries, and so many others. I always realize when I mention certain role groups, I inevitably leave out some. And so I just want to thank everyone for doing what they do, because without them, this hospital couldn't pursue its missions and couldn't operate. And I also want to thank folks in carpentry, engineering, who within a matter of days reconstructed outpatient and inpatient spaces to meet the needs of our COVID patients, as well as the thousands who we screened for the virus. I want to thank our management team, who've literally turned this hospital inside out to meet the demands put on it by patients suffering from COVID. It's truly been remarkable to see inpatient units repurposed, in general care units turned into ICUs, et cetera, et cetera. I also want to thank support departments like nutrition, security, housekeeping, and others who keep the hospital safe, clean, and well-fed during this very challenging time. And I also want to thank our palliative care teams, chaplains, employee assistants, and wellness committees who are dedicating to sustaining the strength and the spirits of our patients and our staff. And I also want to thank the generous donors from outside the institution who've given us lots of food, donated equipment, and donated a sizable amount of money to our emergency preparedness fund. And last but not least, I want to thank our patients, those with COVID and those suffering from other diseases during this period, for the privilege of having the opportunity to participate in their care. And I also want to thank their loved ones for whom this has been a particularly challenging time, unable to visit their loved one in the hospital. I know that's been challenging for those family members. It's been challenging for our staff, and hopefully someday in the not too distant future, we'll have family members reintroduced into our community. So the title of the poem, as I said, is "To Be of Use," and I'd like to read this in honor and tribute to everybody who works at Mass General. The people I love the best jump into work head first, without dallying in the shallows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud, botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. Now, we have had plenty of real work going on within this hospital over the last 6 weeks, over the last 209 years. And as I visit COVID units in other parts of the hospital, I see the incredible satisfaction that our staff gets being involved in this battle. But I also see the exhaustion, I see the fear, I see this emptiness, unable to work with patients and families together. So I know there are huge number of emotions swirling in the minds of our staff. And I just want to thank them all for what they're doing. They really are the heroes of this era. And I know the entire institution, the entire world is grateful for their efforts. So I just, again, want to thank Sarah Alger, the director of the museum, Suzanne Koven, our writer in residence, and Joe Betancourt, our vice president for equity and inclusion, for organizing this program. I want to thank everybody for watching it, and I hope it, as I said at the outset, helped nourish your soul and made you feel more grounded, better in this very challenging time. So thank you all so much for joining us.